Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to Hive Live. I can't tell you how thrilled and honored I am to be here today. I'm in Rockville, Maryland. It's a beautiful day. Just about a 50-minute drive southwest from Baltimore. And today we are going to be on Hive Live talking about a modality that I am very, very passionate about. I don't think even healers know enough about, never mind the general public. And I was really excited when my colleague and acquaintance, friend, who I've, just spent a little bit of time with a couple years ago at a constellation, Family Systems Constellations conference. I thought, who could I have on that would be what I think would be a really great person to talk a little bit about what this is as a modality. And Rani George came to mind because you have done this work for a long time, and you are a part of coordinating trainings on the East Coast here for people to learn this work. And I just learned this morning that you're also a board member on the North America Systems Constellations board. So I just want to say, it is so cool. I get to join people in their homes like Rani to talk about these phenomenal modalities. So I want to welcome you this morning. Thank you for being on. Thank you for having me here. And I think this is going to be a great conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being on this journey.
Yeah, you're welcome.
For all of us.
Yeah, you got it. Hey everybody out there, we're really welcome to this conversation. So first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna just ask, just tell us a little bit about who you are. And before we get into constellations, just give us a little snapshot of who you are in the world and where you've been. And
okay.
Yeah.
Born in India. Came here when I was 2 years old. My parents came. So just a very bicultural experience. Growing up in the 60s and 70s of America was very different than the times now. Although the times are are circling around again.
They are.
So it was just it was growing up, and I think my first real awakening, so I trained as a chemist, my past life as I'm a chemist. I worked for the American Chemical Society for years.
Wow.
Just a very different orientation. And then I had my little ones. My son, in his first winter of life, kept having ear infections. And then the pediatrician said, next winter we're going to put him on maintenance dosage antibiotics. You're going to take a little baby and put antibiotics in him every day, just to prevent ear infections from happening. So I knew something else had to happen. That just wasn't going to work.
So his ear infections were a bit of a turning point for something for you.
Right.
Yeah.
But I just knew there were other realities, there were other ways of doing life.
Wow.
And so I searched and I found a homeopath.
Yeah.
Who lived in my neighborhood, 5 minutes away. He's an MD and a homeopath. So everything kind of felt covered. And he did one constitutional remedy for my son, and he hasn't had an ear infection since. He's 29 years old.
Wow. One constitutional remedy, homeopath, and nothing.
And chronic ear infections just cleared up just like that. So the chemist in me said, I don't know what happened, but the mom in me said, something happened, and I'm following this. So I started training. He really mentored me. So their entire childhood, I hardly ever took them into a doctor because he would work with me on the phone even with, what's going on in their body, what's their spirit like, what's happening, so this whole other way of looking and mothering and calling health forth.
That's so exciting. It's so great, 5 minutes down the road, MD, homeopath, and then having that as your, you're sort of at the forefront of your healthcare as a mom.
Yeah.
What a different option.
Yeah, it really was a tremendous gift when I look back. And you reminded me I want to call him. Thank him.
Well, you can thank him right now.
If you're listening, Dr. Wember, thank you. Fast forward, I was in India for just a family vacation, and in meditation, as I was coming out of meditation, my hands just started moving. And not only were they moving, I knew they were moving something. And so part of me just sort of was a little taken aback, didn't know what was happening, but the other part of me just really, really trusted. This was something sacred. It was coming out of my being in a place with the divine. And I have to trust that. I wasn't going to go to the parish priest and ask him what was happening. But at breakfast that morning, my sister-in-law said there's a new center that's open. It's called Reiki and Pranic Healing. This is 25 years ago. No one was talking about
Reiki and Pranic Healing. Yeah.
But I knew I needed to go. And I went and I made an appointment, and I described what was happening, and he said, "Oh, you're an emerging healer." I'm like, "Oh, you had orange juice for breakfast." I'm like, "What is that?"
That's so great.
How does one do this?
We need to do that more in so many different ways, right?
Yes.
Oh, you had orange juice. Yeah, you're an emerging healer.
Yes.
From the description of what was happening for you.
Right. So I spent time with him, just voraciously taking in whatever he was giving me Reiki sessions, talking with me, just exploring all of this. And then it was time to come home here, and I got back, and I got a message, someone telling me about two women who were PhD psychotherapists, Reiki Masters, and Ursuline nuns, which happened to be the order that taught my high school.
Oh, wow.
So the science, the Reiki, the religion, it was all there. Just all the things that I needed then for comfort. To say this is a path that you can follow. Right. And so it just things just opened up. I did everything. Shiatsu, healing touch, craniosacral. I just kind of took everything that I could, and then but really settled on Reiki as a system that I felt was very simple and clean and transmittable. That that it's a sense of like just really passing on what I've received, what's through me. And I didn't understand till later, till Constellations work, that it was really about passing on an ancestral gift. And so
that's so lovely to hear Reiki talked about, like, just to have that piece be connected, that it's about passing on an ancestral gift.
Yeah. I mean, the Reiki lineage is my particular, the Usui system, and that that lineage of teachers, and for me it's all combined. It all flows together.
Wow, like what a journey of so many threads. And Reiki is, just because we actually haven't talked about Reiki yet, so I want to pause here for folks, because part of this is just sort of explaining a little bit about different modalities. Reiki is hands-on
channeling of energy.
Channeling of energy, which means
that you're not doing it. You're allowing a universal life force to flow through you, to be concentrated, amplified, and to move through you, to be used by the person whom you are channeling it to in the wisdom of their own system. So I'm not doing anything to anybody. I'm just allowing the mystery, to be. And so whatever that system, from a physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, perspective, wherever it is that they're ready to shift, the energy has the wisdom to know where to go and what to do.
Right. So it's like offering support, witness, amplification, love for that shift, whatever the next shift is for that person. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's so self-intelligent.
It is, and I always feel, and I teach this with my students, it's about getting out of the way, about our egos, getting out of the way, and really allowing the clarity of that divine wisdom to flow through us. And that's when the best work happens.
Amen to that. Yeah, it's such a practice.
It is.
Especially when we're new practitioners, I think. I've talked a little bit about that on the road here, and how when you're a new practitioner, you kind of want to make, somebody's paying you for the first time even maybe, and you want to make sure that something good happens, and that's the opposite of getting out of the way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it comes back to how do we define something good happening?
Oh, great. I love it.
How does healing look? Mm-hmm. And especially now, a large part of my work is with hospice. And so I teach volunteers who will be working with patients and their family members and caregivers, and to really talk about, how do we hold death?
Yeah.
And what do we call a successful healing treatment? And what are we holding as an end result? Is there such a thing as an end result?
Right.
What are we holding space for?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's I think especially in hospice, in this work, and in any aspect of Reiki, of this hands-on, any of these modalities, really, we're talking about, again, getting out of the way and just trusting that there's a greater witness to what will healing mean in this situation, and allowing that to.
And I know for me as a hands-on practitioner, building that trust took time. And, getting clear on when my ego was, like sort of sneaky, and when I was really out of the way, just took a lot of practice.
It did.
Yeah.
It absolutely did. And I know I tell students often, like, the piece about Reiki is that you don't follow, like, especially when you first learn, you want to put your hands on everybody.
Yeah.
And the family members around, especially, who you live with, just will be like, this will be so good for you.
Totally.
And I said, you can't, you can make an offer once.
Yeah.
And after that, let them come to you. And then in the case of, pets, plants, there's so many applications to this work, but that fundamental piece of needing permission, and that it being an exchange, that there be a balance. And I think there's a favorite quote of mine. This is from Aboriginal activist, and that is, if you have come here to help me, then you are wasting your time. But if you come knowing that your liberation is bound with mine, then let us work together.
Yeah.
And that, I just feel that says it all.
It really does. Yeah, it's a whole different way of being together, because our liberation is the same, even though our paths are different and our identities may be different.
And the particular thing that we're bringing to this interaction may be different, but there's a balance. And that's always taught in Reiki, about how there must be a balance, whether it's financial or service in kind or something.
Yes. Because
you don't want to leave them indebted.
Yes.
As I'm the healer.
Yes.
And you're the receivee.
Yep.
In that balance.
Thanks for speaking to that. I don't think anybody's really spoken that clearly to that in this series, so I just appreciate that reciprocity piece of healing, and I like your clarity around it.
Yeah, it's something I feel very important.
I love that. Thanks for bringing it forward. Can you tell us now, maybe you just keep on with your story, or sort of maybe tell us a little bit about how you came to constellations. Like, how did you find your way to that?
Well, constellations came, just a little bit later. At that point, my kids were teenagers, and anyone that's a parent of teenagers knows what that can drive you to. But it was just a mother's heart that just, there was stuff going on that just didn't make sense to me. Okay. And again, it was sort of like that search for the homeopath. Mothering really has been, like the crux of my life in terms of my paths of evolution. And there was just stuff. There was just stuff that the kids were going through, that we were going through as a family. And I really, I feel as if that, the same way that I found homeopathy, or homeopathy found me, it was the same reciprocal type of thing, where it was just time. It was time for a different level, a different depth of work, and a different way to access the unknown. It just that talk therapy or the types of resources that I had just weren't addressing. So I went to a family. I'm part of an energy therapy network on the East Coast, and we had monthly meetings where someone would come and just present their modality. And there was a woman who had just graduated from her training, and presented the work. And I had the good fortune to be a representative in that constellation, and it was just the most powerful thing I'd ever experienced. And I knew this was something that it was in me. I just needed to, to move into this. I'll go back to that later.
Okay. Well, let's just pause here, right? So I'm just gonna have you speak up a little bit louder too, if you don't mind.
When I get serious about it.
I know, I love it. I'm like, come on, everybody wants to hear this. This is like especially serious. We got to bring it up. So let's just sort of pause here and just describe what constellations is a little bit. Like if you were, somebody didn't know anything about it, how do you describe it in a couple of sentences?
Okay. Well, it can be done in different formats. So there's one-on-one constellations, which is what I do, one of the things that I do, and that it combines with the Reiki. So that was probably the first piece for me. In that, maybe I'm just going to digress for a minute from your question, and that is that after experiencing that first constellation, I found that when I was within a week or two, when I was with my clients, I was starting to become very aware of their family fields. I became aware of particular people in their families that were somehow present and perhaps involved in the dynamic of whatever it was they were there to look at.
Okay.
And then as that started happening, I thought, oh, there's something more powerful going on here, and I need training. I need some grounding in how to be with this, how to be safely with it for the people that were coming to me and for myself as well.
Yeah.
So then I did my first training then. So the group work looks like, sitting like this. We have a facilitator and a client, and the client is really going to present an issue, something where something just isn't moving in their life right now. Something feels a little stuck, or there's a repetitive pattern of something that doesn't seem to have anything to do with what should be going on in their life, but it's just there. And so the facilitator will just, based on if it feels like an issue that feels resonant and something that the facilitator can work with, hold space for, the facilitator will just ask to select someone. We'll have a circle of people, and select someone to say, for example, someone to represent your mother, someone to represent your grandmother, and someone to represent your great-grandmother. If there's a sense that perhaps there's something in the maternal family line that may have some bearing based on the story, based on the intake. And so the client will then ask other, certain members of the circle if they're willing to represent, to take that role on for them. And then they will connect and just very intuitively place people where it seems as if they belong. And then that's pretty much, that job is done in terms of the client. And that's where we really, we trust that it's a knowing field. That's the term that Hellinger, the originator of this work, the current originator of the work, names an unconscious morphogenic field that really all of our biological families are held in. And what the people that have agreed to be representatives are doing are tapping into that field. And so we ask them to feel into their bodies. Most important part, that we be present in our bodies. feel into their bodies and emotions they may have, and just really take some time to equilibrate and settle into it. And then, if they are called to move, to change their direction, to look in a different location, just allow them to gently feel into the field and embody who it is that they're representing. And then the rest, then the work is the facilitators, to just sort of, based on our training, based on our experience, what does, these two people facing each other mean? Or what does it mean if one cannot look at the other and is looking away? Is there a rupture there? Just exploring.
Totally. And, and I'm going to pause here and say, as somebody who's experienced this work and who has been a representative for people and who has had constellations done for me, I'm a believer, which is part of why, that's a sort of silly way to put it, but I love this work and I think it's so effective. And then I think about people out there that might be watching that are just like, okay, so people represent your mother, your grandmother, your great-grandmother, and then they're going to tune into their bodies in this moment and get information about your grandmother. I think you touched on the knowing field, but I think this, we're so conditioned to not believe what we can't see. Mm-hmm. And this modality kind of invites us into something much bigger. It invites us into a whole body of knowledge and history that is not always super palpable or seeable consciously. And so the knowing field and people representing grandparents and great-grandparents, sometimes you just kind of have to experience it to believe it, because it's pretty easy for it to be like, come on, what do you mean? Do you have anything to say? I'm not pushing you because I'm with you. But is there anything else that you say to sort of people who are like, I don't get it, or
Yeah. Then come have a constellation.
Come have a constellation. Give it a try, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I have, I suppose, experiences that that people have had. Where I've had a client that this is a one-on-one constellation, and where we had, he had not been in touch with his father for about 10 years. They'd had a rupture, mm-hmm. and just were not speaking to each other. Mm-hmm. And we were able to identify a rupture that had happened between his father and his father. Mm. And it was even a misunderstanding. It was a misunderstanding of sorts, but I won't go into those those details. But
the gist is great,
right?
Yeah.
So just a very profound rupture, mm-hmm. and then somehow he was just really able to see how painfully that affected his father, and that in having that rupture happen, the way that fathering, was modeled for him, or what was accessible for him in a father-son relationship, was not what my client had been yearning for all his life. Mm-hmm. But being able to see from that perspective, there was this compassion, just this shifted perspective of what had been his father's life experience. Mm-hmm. And that actually what came out of it was a profound appreciation for the fact that in that, given his life experience, that he chose to say yes to life and to have a son. Mm. And that in kind of in the middle of this life of yearning for a deeper connection with his father, he could actually shift to gratitude that his father couldn't
do it at all.
Couldn't do it at all.
Be a father at all.
And I got a phone call 3 days later that he had received a phone call from his dad.
After 10 years. Yeah, that's amazing. Right, so when
Tears.
Yeah.
Tears, just... And so I've had countless stories of things that happen as we're speaking in live time, people that I've run into 3 years after a constellation, and they'll look at me, and all of a sudden they have the consciousness that, oh, they had been afraid to get on an airplane, and we had done a piece of work around how a grandparent had died in a crash on an airplane, but as she's seeing me now, she realizes she's been flying all over the place for a year, and it hadn't even registered. That's how subtle,
right.
How subtle the work can be.
Yeah. So like there is a tending to what maybe didn't get enough tending to back in the lineage. That's part of what happens?
Absolutely, part of what happens. And I think a very deep piece of this is the acknowledging what is or what was. Because we're not going back to lay blame anywhere. We're just looking to see what was.
Right.
What was happening? What were the weights? What were the challenges? And with that, an honoring. And what we find is that often we are carrying out of misguided loyalty. We are carrying the weights of those that were excluded. Something was just too painful for the family to deal with, and so that person just almost didn't exist, got erased from the family tree. If we don't talk about her, she wasn't part of us, and the family soul doesn't countenance that. And so what we find is that a generation, 2 generations, 3 generations later, somebody will be carrying this dynamic because that person's fate wasn't honored, wasn't acknowledged, and wasn't honored. And what we find is that when that can be seen, then without getting too woo-woo up here, that soul rests, and the current generation is free to live life out of what they're here for.
And not be carrying this back burden or this back fate that was from another time. Yeah, it's super powerful, and I think a lot. Again, I just want to remind people that you sort of say, well, I don't know what happened to my great grandmother, or I can feel it, or maybe I have no idea. And part of what is so phenomenal about constellations is that you don't need to know any of your lineage. That literally opening a circle with having people be representatives, it comes through, whatever wants to be seen, and comes through and sort of helps get, if it's time to be witnessed and the right conditions and the right people are there, creating the right conditions, it brings it through for that, for the family and for your freedom as somebody who's sort of bringing it to the circle and bringing it to the planet, really, for resolution and for rest. I like how you put that, like a soul at rest. Yeah, that's amazing. Do you want to say anything else?
Well, this may be too early, but
No,
I just feel as if it just helps. It speaks to me of a current situation, in our country.
Yeah, speak up a little bit.
Okay. That first of all, that this work is so widely accepted in Europe, in Asia. There's just countries that every street corner has a constellations facilitator. There are education.
Seriously?
Absolutely.
I didn't realize it was that strong. Yeah, Asia, Europe.
Educational systems that incorporate it, hospital systems that incorporate it, political systems that incorporate it.
Wow.
So I mean, that's not all of them, but there are, there's smatterings of this. It's taken some time. It's taken some time for it to take hold here. And one thought that I have, and that many have, is the fact of the history of immigration in this country. That aside from the native peoples, everyone else at some point came from somewhere. Their families came from somewhere. And leaving homeland is considered one of the great traumas in a system.
Mm-hmm.
So if it was famine, if it was war, if it was just a family situation, you know, a family bankruptcy or something specific to a family, whatever it was, there was a rupture, there was a pain, and part of the ethos of this country is the independence, and we can just do it on our own, type of thing, and so when that gets enculturated, that's what really somehow gets passed on, and there's so many who, short of saying, yeah, I'm Scotch, German, Dutch, I have all this, but to really have a sense of who they come from and why they left, and has that trauma been resolved. I think that's a lot of what's buried, and about why can be difficult for people to come to this work, because there's such a entrenched loyalty to that silence.
Ah, it's so deep.
Of what we have left behind.
Right, we don't talk about it. We can't talk about it. There's too much pain there, so we're gonna avoid it or unconsciously block it out. So that's interesting. So a little bit of analysis on why the United States and North America has been a lot slower to welcome this work, embrace it, to utilize it as a phenomenal healing tool.
And then it takes us to our buried traumas here within the country.
Which we have deep.
Yeah.
We're seeing the phenomenal symptoms of today. Very much so, crystal clear.
Yeah. And I think this is appropriate to share at this moment when Francesca Mason Boring, who is my current teacher and mentor, she was coming here in 2015 for her first 7-month training, and she said, her first time coming east and south, and she had some things to explore in terms of what might be the dynamics, what might she be needing here, and that she was in touch with a facilitator who had for years been facilitating in the South. The Deep South, and asked her, how does slavery show up? How do these different dynamics show up? And the answer was that slavery hadn't shown up. So that just tells you how deep, how deeply buried.
Yeah.
And so I think of a poster that I saw at the march that said, "Thank you, Mr. Trump, for waking us up." And I think it's time. And I think this is what I'm particularly the most excited about, is some of the work that's going on right now with race relations, gender issues, anything that's people that are struggling. And that this modality is a really powerful resource, a powerful tool to be able to go under.
Yeah.
To really see what's happened, what's the truth of what has happened, and there's a way in which, and this representing is, I think, a tremendous gift for being able to the concept of walking in another's shoes. You've repped. You know what I mean? There can't be anything more profound than being able to stand in someone in a representation of something that you would have to live 10 lifetimes before you could experience all these different things at such a primal, every part of your fiber type of experience.
Yeah, it really is. It's like nothing else to be a representative for somebody's grandmother or somebody's partner or somebody's child.
Of a totally different race, of a totally different generation, of a totally different
time.
Anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so talk about growing compassion.
Yeah.
Talk about being able to then have conversations where we're not triggering each other from our own place.
Right.
You know, that we can really open things up. So that's been my experience of late in doing these works. I mean, you need really good, strong containers.
Yeah.
Because these are deeply held issues. And you need good, strong containers to be able to hold what we're allowing, what we're seeing coming up.
Yeah.
And to really hold that transformation.
Absolutely. And I think, I think constellations has a very particular, as a tool for race relations, I think specifically as a tool for white people. A lot of times white people say, well, it wasn't me, it's not me who made those decisions about slavery and XYZ. And I think constellations as a healing tool, as a way of seeing, is such a incredible opportunity for, on a couple levels, as a white person, to be able to look at my lineage and the ways that my ancestors participated in slavery and racism and the genocide of Native Americans, because we know that everybody's lineage, as a white person, everybody's lineage has participated in it. That's just true. And so to be able to, in a nuanced, thoughtful way, be able to witness it in a community, that's what we're there for. We're not there for blame and shame and more separation. We're there to illuminate and to take responsibility for, and to understand, maybe I'm stuck in guilt as a white person, or maybe I'm stuck in unconscious shame, but really my job, especially right now, and it always has been, as I've woken up, is to get out of those things and into action and into right relationship with, my own lineage, and then the community system, so I think that there's a lot of opportunity for folks in privileged groups, in dominant groups, to be able to look, sort of creatively and directly at the truth, like you said, in a different way.
And for people of color,
to
be able to see from another vantage point of group loyalty, and to really, I had an experience once of representing a slave owner, and of having the representatives for slaves who were in just horrendous physical pain in front of me. And I just, that sense of just looking around, because there were no other representatives around me. I was just standing there alone. And I remember having this feeling like, I just kept hearing, I was told they weren't human. I was told they weren't human.
You say that maybe a little bit louder, just because I could barely hear you.
The phrase, I was told they weren't human. And I could see that there was a human being suffering there. And it didn't sit with what I had been told. And I was looking for the group that had held that consciousness. And finally a representative from my mother came in. And I just melted. She needed to just hold me while I wept. And wept and wept and wept. Because it was like my eyes had just been opened. But as a person of color, holding, being in that representation, I could understand how a group dynamic could evolve like that, and what it took for him to be able to see differently. And so that's priceless.
So much happening all at once there. Like, it's just mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Priceless.
Yeah.
And priceless in the sense of of the potency of the healing that can happen in that moment, in the constellation, for potentially all the representatives. All at once. Yeah, I think there's just thousands and thousands of stories of the work that Constellation's done on this planet, and my hope is yet to do. Maybe we could talk a little bit about how, maybe people who are interested now in constellations because they're watching this. So, how do people get involved, or what's a good book to start with? That's a sort of a total shifting of gears, but I feel like and we don't,
No, it's important. Well, first of all, I'll mention specific larger events that are happening. So there's a training. This Francesca Mason Boring, my current teacher, is coming to the DC area in March for 7-month training. But this is for people that are really ready to start. Well, she calls it facilitator training and spiritual deepening. So it can be for people that have that end goal of being a facilitator, or it can be simply 7 months of going through this process of transformation, taking yourself through this process of transformation.
1 weekend a month.
1
7
weekend
months.
a month.
Yeah.
Well, 3 days.
3 days, yeah.
3-day weekend, 7 months.
Mm-hmm.
We have coming for the first time in a long time the North American conference in this work. So it's coming to Virginia Beach in October. It's a little ways away, but it's been on the West Coast for many years now, and it's coming to the East Coast. And I just highly recommend it. It's just a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. First of all, that it's here, and just to get a smattering of all the different amazing things that people are doing with this work. There's so many pairings. I mean, even in the 2015 training, we had lawyers, we had naturopaths, we had land surveyors, we had, I mean, just the random, and how it is that people are integrating this work, because it becomes a way of seeing life. It's not just a modality that you do in a treatment room. It's a way of being in life, seeing life, and that enriches everybody. We have a lot of amazing facilitators up and down the East Coast. I don't know, I should know a good website for, but get in touch with me.
Yeah.
If you want to find somebody in your location, I know just wonderful people, New York, Boston, Connecticut, Philly, all up and down the East Coast, people that are pioneering and doing this work, and I would love to refer you.
Great. And that's also part of what we're doing with the Hive Directory, is to try to get modalities that are so progressive like this sort of networked more, so that it's really easy to find a constellations facilitator. I know that we have Judy up in Moncton. It's not Nova Scotia. What's the next one over? Anyways, Moncton, I was in Canada. Sorry, Judy. And she's a constellations person up there. So we're really excited to lift up what y'all are doing. It's so exciting. I took a picture of a whole bunch of books that you have, so I'll make sure we post that. So those are probably some good book recommendations.
Very good books that, book reading is a hard, at least for me, it's a hard way. I had a friend actually that was telling me about the work and kept giving me these books, and they were just so dry.
Right. So the experience is the best way to interact. And
for some people, that is the way.
Totally. And as somebody, the conferences are phenomenal. I've been to 2, and they really do give you such a incredible experience of the diversity of the work and practitioners and people. And I left changed every single time.
And of course, the intensive
in
Connecticut, it'll be. I don't know the dates yet. It's in the summer, in the summer sometime, and that's different from the conference in that there's a set of faculty, but you just sort of work with. You're there, I think, for 5 days, and you just go really deep. You're with one group of people, and you're all exploring. So it's very intimate, and it goes very deep. So very different from a conference setting. So 2 different things depending on your personality, what you might be drawn to.
Yeah.
But to explore.
We're going to start wrapping up, but we got a chance to talk before we started the interview, and you had a monthly event last night that I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, because it's so relevant, and I thought the activity that you did was so interesting and stimulating for this moment in history, and it just sounded so helpful for people. So I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about what y'all did.
Absolutely. I had a group that we were gathering together. It was called Yoga Constellations, which my daughter and I do together, where we use yoga as a way to sort of enter into our bodies, to just be really firmly grounded in our bodies, an important premise of this work. And then we shared as a group just perhaps what we're going through post-election, post-inauguration, of the divide, the profound divide, evolving in the country, the fear, the anxiety, and so I just asked everyone to just kind of share what is one way, or some way that you feel called or have just heard of that seems like a possibility. What are ways that we can move forward instead of just kind of getting shut down by fear? So I actually have some of them. I have some of them here.
Great.
Civic engagement, nonviolent teaching with systemic thinking, exploring exclusion, diversity education, political action, deep listening for the story behind the story, building bridges with family, so starting within our own family systems, neighborhood gatherings, grounding, clearing neighborhood gatherings, and gratitude and encouraging each other. So these are things that people came up with. I folded them and put them under different, like 8 different stacks of blankets, and just scattered them around the space. And then we just sort of opened the field, so no one knew what particular action was under what particular blanket. And everyone was just encouraged to just walk around and engage with each blanket. So they're just really feeling into their bodies. What was their reaction as they approached a particular blanket? Was it like, oh, this feels really comfortable, or oh my God, I don't want to go anywhere near this, or this feels like challenging, like not comfortable but challenging. Just different reactions. And so everyone we took like a half an hour, and everyone just really kind of circled around. So we've engaged the field of change, of transition, and it was really profound. It was amazing to watch people, come up against a blanket and just be like repelled by it, or one that they would just like lie down and like curl up with the blanket because they felt so in tune with it, and others just started dancing when they were on a particular blanket. So just that felt sense of in their body, the emotions, whatever was evoked from it. And then at the end of that time, when everyone had kind of either settled on one or straddling two, or in the middle and not feeling connected to anything, we just had everyone open the little piece of paper, and it was really some amazing stories that came out of that. It was clear to each person present, why it was that they were kind of repelled by one, or they were really drawn to another, and in the end, for all of us, it was a sense of like, okay, like we have our marching orders. We just have something. We have a concrete thing that feels resonant with our system, not just something that everyone says, do it.
Yeah.
This is something resonant with our system, with why we're here, who we can be in this moment in history, and as a beginning movement, and everyone left with what it is that they could move forward
And did some people choose the thing that they were like there was an aversion to because they thought, oh, I actually need to do this thing because I don't want to do it?
And one person, I'm sure she won't mind me sharing, was saying, and it was that exact dynamic, and she said she could feel her grandmother tapping her on the shoulders, saying, you can do it.
Wow.
You can do it.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that activity.
It was a gift. It really was a gift.
Yeah. And it's something that we had mentioned that it could even be translated into an activity at home for people. Absolutely. If you have maybe just a few things you're thinking, well, I have X amount of hours in the day. I can't, I still have to live life. I have all my stuff to do. But like, what's one thing? Try, like two or three,
fold it up in a piece of paper so you're not looking and you're not influenced consciously by the decision, but just fine, go and do what I did, put a blanket over it and just stand with it and see what's your relationship with it, and compare all three of them and see where it is that you feel drawn, emotionally comfortable with, or it feels like a challenge, like this is what you can do. It may not be the easiest thing to do, but it's what you can offer, and that you will bring something to it and make a change. It's just
great.
It's just something you can just sit in your room, in the privacy of your room, and do. And it helps explore this work.
Yeah, well. and it helps explore this work, and it helps potentially get us out of a stuck place or an overwhelmed place into some sort of movement that, towards what we're here to bring, like you said, and it's just so easy right now to get stuck in inaction, which, no blame, shame, or guilt around that, but, and also it's nice to feel a deepening of alignment with what we are doing versus the thing that everybody else is doing or that you think you should be doing. So this is such a cool tool to get in relationship with that in a clear way, resonant way.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, and thanks for holding the space here at your home to do that work with people.
It's a joy. It really is a joy. I think when you find that place that your gifts meet the world's needs.
All good.
All good.
Yeah, feels really good. I want to thank you so much for your time, and ask you if there's anything else that you want to leave people with, a hope or an invitation or a call to action, whether it's about constellations or just something that's in your heart that you don't need to, but just a invitation.
Yeah. No, I think just I don't know, somehow knowing. My daughter said something in a constellation piece last week that she just said, "I was born for these times," and it blew me away to have that come off her lips. And as a mother, almost like, what does that mean? But I think that I feel that just says it all to me, that we're here because we were born for these times, and let's just step up and do what that means. And it absolutely can mean that you're in your room holding space for the country in your heart. I in no way mean that everyone has to be out there, holding a sign, calling the congressman, holding groups. All of that is necessary. All of it is important. And it's the matter of finding your peace. How does your particular soul want to really contribute to where we are right now?
Perfect. Born for these times.
Born for these times.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just such a treat. Y'all, thank you for being with us this morning. For those of you tuning in after, this is like deep wisdom for turbulent times, this week in particular, I think. So thank you, Rani, so much. And thanks to all the constellation facilitators out there. Yes. Shout out to y'all. Thank you for the work that you're holding down, for the opportunity to do this profound work of healing lineage and creating liberation and medicine for our time. So thanks so much. We'll see you tomorrow. I have a travel day, so tomorrow I'll be off, and let's see, I don't even know who's next. You'll have to check the schedule. I think I'll be in North Carolina though, so I'll look forward to seeing you then. Love you guys so much. We'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye. Have a great day.